Hmm.
What the reason I'm moving to the Moedim is because we're only a couple of weeks away from Pesach. I'm sure there'll be a Pesach Yom Yun and things like that. And also Purim's also a holiday. So I want to talk about the holiday calendar in Sefer Vayikra and I'm sorry, and how it fits in into Sefer Vayikra. Now, in general, the holidays we find in almost each one of the books. We don't have them in Breshit, but in Sefer Shemot we have the Shlosh Regalim, we have the story Passover and the laws of Passover in Chag HaMatzot, but then we have the Shlosh Regalim in the end of Parshat Mishpatim, and then we have them repeated in Ki Tisaf to the sin of the golden calf. And Vayikra is the main section of the laws. We have the korbanot of the holidays in Sefer Bamidbar, and we have the Shlosh Regalim again in Sefer Devarim. We're not going to do all that today, but I'm just pointing that out because Vayikra, I guess, is a primary source that describes the holidays with what they're about. But there is some reason why the specific element of the holiday is that it talks about will be in Vayikra, and that has to do with the number seven. So that's our topic today. We'll get started. Um, this will take us for probably a week or two till we get through all the modim in the proper way. So let me share my screen. And again, I apologize. I sort of have half my voice this week, but hopefully you can hear. Let me make sure also before I do that, make sure I have the right microphone set up. I think. Okay, we're good. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is my little introduction that I wrote up. Okay, I said this already. Explain how the holidays and more relate to the rest of the book. So first thing I want to talk about from a technical point of view, I want to talk about subunits in Sefer Vayikra. Now it's clear Vayikra is not a plain old halacha book, just organized by halachic topics, even though there's a lot of logic to the order, but it's primarily halacha. It's definitely not chronological because topics were given at different times, but it's very easy to identify units in Sefer Vayikra. So what I'm trying to do is first identify each unit and then try to understand why Sefer Vayikra puts this unit next to this unit next to this unit. So first thing I want to do is go through the second half of Vayikra and identify the units, and then we'll work backwards and that'll take us to the Chagim. So something very technical, but it's an important tool to understand of how to appreciate juxtaposition of parshiot and how a book develops a theme. So the last 2 weeks we were studying Bahar B'Chukotai, which was 25-26. I'm pretty sure I showed you how chapter 25 began with the Dibor Bahar Sinai and ended. It was a very clear-cut unit. Maybe we'll review it again in a minute. Right? So I want to show other units how simple they are. So I listed it here. I'm going to open up a Hebrew Tanakh just because we're not translating the words. I just want to see the whole page. I want to show you what's going on. So I'm going to stop this share and open up my, but that's not the chat. We want this. Want that to turn off. One second. Okay, I'll share my screen again. Here we go. In chapter 18, we talked about this before. Make it a lot smaller. Okay. We start with the Dibor. God speaks to Moshe, tells him this introduction we talked about before, Ani Hashem Elokechem, which is the biggest theme of Chumash. That's I'm God, your boss, the covenant. Don't act like an Egyptian. Do follow my laws instead. And then we have the Arayot, and then a summary of keep these laws. If you don't keep them properly, I'll throw you out like I threw them out. And then with a nice little summary, keep my guard. Don't follow those other customs of those enemies. Don't defile yourself with them. Ani Hashem Elokechem. Remember, that's the key phrase all through the second half of Vayikra. I'm Hashem, your boss, and that affects the beginning and end. So that's a standalone unit called the Arayot. The next chapter, again, starts with the Dibor, with Kedoshim to you. We saw about how this reflects the Ten Commandments. Chapter 18 was how not to behave, this is how you should behave. And look how it ended. Remember, Ani Hashem, Ki Kadosh Ani Hashem Elokechem. And then we have all these laws. We saw the parallels to the Ten Commandments. I still owe you a share on the Chukim inside. And then we end with Moznei Tzedek, Abnei Tzedek, about having just ways. Well, again, Ani Hashem Elokechem. And that's why I took you out of Egypt, the first Ten Commandments. And therefore keep my laws and do them. Ani Hashem. you see each unit begins and ends. It has a dibor. It was introduced with a dibor, and there's a nice opening line and closing line to match. Chapter 20 is a little bit different. It begins not with begins with a dibor and starts with the law about capital punishment for the laws that we had back in chapter 18. And unlike almost all the other ones, the summary psukim, which are usually in the beginning and end, happen to be in the middle. Remember, we had V'kadishtem v'tem toshim and pasuk zayin, Ken Hashem Elokechem. See that recurring theme, and Ki Chukim Ani Hashem Kadishchem, and we end with Beitem li kadoshim ki kadosh ani v'avdei otchem min amim li. That should be the end. But for some reason, in chapter 20, we open the chapter and close the chapter instead of with an introductory line, with the technical line about death penalty. That had to do with the focus of that. Now, but pay attention. This is the Dibor to Bnei Israel. Got that? The previous chapter was talking to Kodat Bnei Israel, and the previous chapter also, in chapter 18, God was speaking to Bnei Israel. And now in chapter 21, it was in chapters 18, 19, and 20, the Dibor to the people of Israel. Chapter 21, which we call Parshat Emor, God's now telling Moshe, give these laws to the Kohanim Bnei Aaron. Remember the phrase, tell this to the Kohanim Bnei Aaron, and tell them the laws of how they have to behave outside the temple. Not their behavior in the temple, but because they work in the temple, there's certain prohibitions, things they can't do outside the temple, as far as becoming in contact with dead bodies and things like that. Then, after giving laws for the Kohanim, then we have another dibur. V'daber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el Aaron lemor, a certain set of laws that Aaron himself has to know. So again, first there's say these laws to the Kohanim, Bnei Aaron, and then we have a law for Aaron himself. Okay, and then when this is all over, look at this summary here, which is interesting. V'daber Moshe el Aaron ve'abanav ve'al Bnei Israel. See how that summarized the whole unit? Remember? God spoke to Moshe, tell these laws to Bnei Israel. Then, and what's interesting, those laws cost tumat. Now, if you don't keep them, the prohibitions. Then tell laws to Aaron and his sons, and then tell laws to Aaron. And then we summarize backwards. Moshe spoke these to Aaron, his sons, and all Bnei Israel, which means that's making a unit out of everything from chapter 18 to chapter 21. It's simple. Now, chapter 22, we have laws, again, to Aaron and his sons about how they have to behave because they bring korbanot, okay? And then you can't bring a korban if you're tameh, what's called adin in the and who can eat kodashim. And then another dibur, okay? Tell Aaron and his sons again, tell them when you bring a korban, okay, how the animal has to be pure. In other words, I call this, the first section is gavra, the second is chefza. Here's how you have to be in the proper the proper cleanliness to be able to bring a korban and to eat the kodashim, and how the animal that you bring has to be the proper type of korban and can't have a blemish. And then one more law that has to do not with the animal. The animal is fine, but the situation. This is a good one. In other words, there's one law about how you have to be the proper person. You have to be properly clean. You have to be tahor. You have to be spiritually clean to bring a korban and eat kodashim. How the animals that you bring can't have any type of mum, and have a blemish. And now look how these are different. When you bring an animal, remember that korbanot are either cattle or sheep. Shor kesef ois kibaled. For the first 7 days, it can be brought. Only from the 8th day on, you can bring a korban. Now, there's nothing wrong with the animal except that it's too young. Beforehand, it was an animal that had a blemish. Here, the animal is fine. It's just, it's too young. Let it grow up a little bit first. Let the mother nurse a little bit. Okay? And then only after 8 days, and notice here again, 7 and 8, that's going to come up a lot in Sefer Vayikra. Then another law, that each animal is fine, but you can't shech the mother and the child on the parent and the child on the same day. It's called otod beno. You understand? The situation, that the animal is fine, but the situation, the context is wrong. Okay. And then when you bring a korban todah, not to have leftovers. Dina pigo. And then we have a beautiful summary of this whole unit. See, we're summarizing these laws. Keep my mitzvot and do them. I'm God. Don't chalel. Don't defame or don't discredit my name. My reputation. This is what thing we had started in Breshit. God's reputation is why we're chosen, and therefore don't desecrate my name. Okay, because I need to be sanctified among the people of Israel. I'm the God who separated you to serve me, to make you kadosh, and that's why I took you out of Egypt. Again, see how this summarizes this whole unit? We have more laws, but we're going back to that introductory line we had back in chapter 18. Again, we talked about in all this summarizes the Kedusha of man. Kedusha of Am Yisrael, how they have to behave, how they should behave, how they need to behave. The Kedusha of the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol. And also the sanctity of the animals that we bring to God and how we bring them. But the idea is two things that look nice, that are proper, that when people observe them, um, it, it's it, it the way you behave matches the sanctity and respect for the temple. Right? So this is a summary that ends what I call Kedushat Adam, and now we go to Kedushat Zman. I did all that for the introduction, and now Perek Chav Gimel has a very interesting structure. There's more than one dibor, but there's something that makes again a whole framework. Okay, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, "Daber b'nei Yisrael b'matalem modei Hashem," and then we're going to have Shabbat, and then Moadim. Then we reduce the Moadim. Then we have what's called Chag HaMatzot, Pesach, Chag HaMatzot, what we call Shavuot, followed by Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Again, the names will be a little bit different. And then, and I'll show you in a better source sheet in a minute, but there's dibors inside. There's a dibor here, another dibor here, another dibor here. But the last line is going to summarize the whole chapter. Now I'm going to do my regular source sheet now and show you something interesting. All I want to show you is that chapter 23 has its own structure because it begins with, let me show you in a minute on my regular source sheet. Right now it's very technical, but I'll try to give it meaning in a minute. That was the wrong share. Share, I need my source sheet PDF. Here we go. Okay. So these were the units we did, chapter 18. I just summarized everything we just did. Moadim, and then we'll see chapter 24 in a minute. Now, we'll go back to the review of sevens and Chumash in a minute. I want to look at the beginning of chapter 23, and this is something that affects your, if not your daily life, your weekly life. See what I mean? A new dibor, Vadaber Shem Moshe Lemor. Listen carefully. Daber al b'nei Yisrael b'matarehem, modei Hashem, asher tikrotam mikrei kodesh and moadai. Tell b'nei Yisrael, these are the set aside times. These are the times that we meet God. Okay? And you have to call them Mikrei Kodesh. We'll talk about that in a minute. And these are the Moadim. And then we talk about Shabbat. You work 6 days, seventh day you can't work. It's a Mikrei Kodesh. And then these are the Moadim. Now, you guys, you tell me, is Shabbat a Mikrei Kodesh or not?
It's not a moed.
It's not a Moed, it's a Mikrei Kodesh. Got it? And that's why a very interesting introduction. God tells them, these are the Moadim. These are the Moadim. We'll talk about what then. And you make the Mikrei Kodesh. And then we talk about Shabbat, which God made the Mikrei Kodesh. You didn't decide that. God decided that. Shabbatid Hashem. And then these are the Moadim that you have to decide when they are, because you decide when Rosh Chodesh is. And then we have everything from here on is going to be on a lunar calendar. Okay. On the first month on this day, second month on this day. But we have everything now about with lunar dates. And for the first time in Chumash, we have holidays with lunar dates. In Parsha Mishpatim, all the holidays had, there's Shosh Regalim on the agricultural times of the year. Here they have the lunar dates. Now, I'm going to go back to this in a minute. I just want to show you. I just made this, you can see this nicely. I try to make it as clear as I could, and I messed up, Bill. I messed up. Okay. I have a page break in the middle, and there shouldn't be a page break there. Oh, Maybe I can still see it. I'll make it even smaller. So you see it. Okay. This should do it. Nah, still too big. Here we go. Okay. This is, let me annotate real fast. Annotate. And my marker. Here we are. Sorry. We're starting from here. This is the chapter. From here to here. Notice there's an opening line. דבר בני ישראל ומועדי Hashem, datat Shabbat, Ela Modei Hashem. And then we end with Vayidabra Moshe Modei Hashem Bnei Israel, a summary. But I'm trying to understand that we have a unit there. Now, tell me how that affects us in our day-to-day Judaism, at least on the holidays. When do we quote this pasuk here?
Kiddush.
Yeah. Kiddush when?
Yeah, Yontif.
Which Yontifs?
Pretty much all of them.
Everyone. Even Yom Kippur if you have to make Kiddush. But basically, every time except Shabbos, right? Now, it's a very short Kiddush, isn't it? Because the mitzvah on Shabbos day is to make a short Kiddush. That's why it's called Kiddush Rabbah, being it's called Lashon Sagi Nahar. An opposite of that. Now, some people, that's way too short for them. And what do they say first? Right. First they say
Ela Moedei.
Yeah, they say Ela Moedei Hashem, Vayikra Kodesh, and then they do just pasuk Daled, and then they do Daled. Understand? Now, but when do we do it? We do it for all these holidays that are in between these two psukim. That's really simple, isn't it? But most people have no idea why that's Kiddush and Yom Tov, that's all. But when you see the structure, you realize why you're Yotze with that little line for all these holidays. Makes sense, nice and simple. Now, there's something else that's real easy. There's something a little trickier now. I want to go back to let me stop the share and go back to my regular source sheet. I'm sorry. Here we are. And open it back at bigger again. What's very tricky here is that this I have in English, Hebrew, nice and simple. Listen to the wording. God tells Moshe, tell Bnei Israel, these are the Moedim that you call me Krei Kodesh, and then these are my Moedim. Then Shabbat, and then I start again. It appears that Pasuk Gimel is parenthetical. Is that my point clear? We have an introductory line. These are the Moedim that you decide, parentheses, Shabbat, and then these are the Moedim. Got it?
Got it.
Yeah. Now, why would Chumash do something like that? Isn't that begging interpretation?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what do Shabbat and Yom Tov have in common?
They have rest.
Malacha.
Yeah. There's no malacha, but we'll see. But the malacha and Shabbat and Yom Tov is different. They're both Mikra Kodesh. What's Mikra Kodesh mean? It's a time to gather. It's a time to gather for whatever reason, but you call out, you're separating a time to gather. Now, Shabbat, God set Shabbat into motion. Ever since Shabbat started, if we have time, we'll get there at the end of the Shirtei when the first Shabbos was, but every 7 days, ever since we got the manna, we've kept Shabbos. Ever since Parsha B'Shalach, chapter 16, starting on the 22nd day of Iyar, in the year we came out of Egypt, before we get the Torah even. Ever since then, we've been keeping every 7 days Shabbat. We haven't lost track, which is a pretty good track record. It's pretty amazing. Now, Yom Tov is also time to gather, but we decide when we gather. Why? Because it depends on the new moon. And we decide where the new moon is, because the new moon is not in sync with the sun. And there's a new moon because it's not exactly the amount of days. Therefore, it can be 29 days or 30 days a month. And we decide where the month is. And basically, that's why we call out and we decide. Now, what about Shabbat? The work that can be done on Shabbat is Kol Melacha. And on Yom Tov, it's always going to be Kol Melechet Avodah. What emphasizes later on. Understand the difference? It sounds very similar, but there's a small technical difference. On Shabbat, it says, all work can be done. And on Yom Tov, it says, Kol Melechet Avodah lo taseh. Now, as they say, Lamai Daf Kamina, what do we know from day-to-day Judaism? From day-to-day Yacha? What's the main difference?
Ochel nefesh.
Which means on Yom Tov you can smoke, men can
Mhm.
smoke, and women can cook. I hope I can get away with that old-fashioned line. Right. My group is old enough. Some people would be upset by that, but I used to say that. But in a nutshell, what do we know? For some reason, even though you feel guilty doing it, don't you? Because even though it's okay to cook on Yom Tov, it just doesn't feel right for some reason. Right? Now, on the other hand, but the question, what's the reason for the difference? Now, the reason for Malacha on Shabbat is totally different than the reason for Malacha on Yom Tov. Right? Why, according to Chumash, why are we forbidden to do work on Shabbat?
Remember creation.
Because God rested. Remember, it says so in the Ten Commandments. It's obvious. Our goal is to remember creation and the theme of creation. Not only that He created, but why He made man in God's image. Instead of therefore we stop all creativity one day a week to make sure we use our creativity properly in the 6 days of the week. But put it this way: what makes Shabbos is Shvitat Malacha. Notice, you're refraining from work. Notice, just like this, God could have continued creating. He decided to stop. And therefore, on Shabbat, we have the ability to be creative, but we decide we're not doing it. We refrain from work. You have to hold back your creativity to reflect on the previous week, the next week. But keeping Shabbat hopefully will make your week meaningful if it's kept properly. But what makes Shabbat is Shvitat Malacha, your decision to stop working. Now, why is it forbidden to work on Yom Tov? There's no connection between Yom Tov and God's creation, like Shabbos is. But the reason you can't work on Yom Tov is a totally different reason. Anyone know why?
It's a Mikra Kodesh, and how can you have that if you're working?
Yeah. What we call in English a bank holiday, or at least in England, they have that in America also. A bank holiday is when the businesses are closed. Now, if you remember, anyone, half of you probably from Teaneck, and what's in Teaneck, Bergen County, whatever it's called, where there's Sunday blue laws. In certain places, old America used to be more, that in order to enable people to go to church, right, shopping malls had to be closed, businesses had to be closed. But the goal was not working to enable going to church. Stores have to be closed.
The blue laws.
Yeah, exactly, blue laws. So, Easter Malacha and Yom Tov is basically blue laws, right? No, we need a day to remember some historical theme or some agricultural theme, whatever the theme of each Yom Tov is. But to enable Yom Tov, banks have to be closed. Now,
wouldn't the blue laws be more a better description of Chol HaMoed and not the Sur Malacha of Yom Tov?
it depends how strict your blue laws are. Okay. But what I'm getting at is that to enable people to gather, I need that. What Ramban explains beautifully, he goes, Kol melechet avodah, he says, melacha shebesadot. Melacha shebesadot means you work in the field. What I like to say is, the way Chumash describes working on Yom Tov is while most Jews who keep half Shabbos think Yom Tov work is on Shabbos. There's people who keep Shabbos, I don't go to the office. There's people who say, I'm not going to turn on light. What do you mean turning on lights to all these little, all these rabbinic things? I don't work on Shabbos. I'm not supporting that. I'm saying there's a lot of people, I call that sort of half Shabbos. That name got stolen by teenagers with their cell phones. But what I mean by half Shabbos means I keep Shabbos, I don't go to work. My office is closed. But I'll drive, why can't I drive? I'll rest, I'll go to the beach, whatever I do, but I'm not working on Shabbat. Got it? Now, technically speaking, that's pretty much exactly what work is on Yom Tov. The idea is that you don't go to work. It's a special day. But don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean it's okay to go to do Malach on Yom Tov. But the reason, to make it nice and simple, refraining from work is what creates Shabbat. Refraining from work enables Yom Tov. Understand the difference?
Yes.
Refraining from work enables Yom Tov, enables you to gather. Bikrar Kodesh is to call it together. Refraining from work is what makes Shabbat Shabbat. That's the main thing. Now, the Rambam asks a great question, right? Why start Moedim and then mention Shabbat and then start Moedim? Just either say Shabbat, which we've said already, right? We had Shabbat many times beforehand. So the Rambam gives a beautiful explanation. He says, I might think that Shabbat is more important than Yom Tov. I'm sorry, that Yom Tov is more important than Shabbat. Why? Because everyone knows Yom Tov. More people come to shul on Yom Tov than on Shabbos, right? That proves it's more important. Now, and because it's more important, what do we know we can do on Yom Tov? On Yom Tov, you're allowed to work. You can cook, right? You can cook. Certain things you can do on Yom Tov. So what happens if Shabbos comes out on Yom Tov? What might override? If Ochel Nefesh is a mitzvah to say, I might think that I can do, if Shabbos comes out on Yom Tov, I can cook. So why does Chumash begin all the Yom Tovim with Shabbat? It's like before I start the Moedim, Shabbos overrides. Shabbos is more important. Now, he brings a beautiful proof from Parsha Vayikra. Look how Vayikra starts almost the exact same format. I'll share my screen real fast. Actually, nowadays nothing's going fast. If you listen carefully, you can hear jets going around in the background. Hopefully there are. It's okay. Where are we? We have to go to a different book. We have to go to Shmot. Look how simple it is. Shmot chapter 35. Make it nice and big. There we go. Okay. Moshe gathers all the people together. These are the things that you need to do, that God commanded us to do. That's clearly referring to the Mishkan. Why? Because then Moshe says in Pasuk Daled, Moshe tells the people, these are all things you have to do. All the things afterwards. Sorry, just let me jump ahead for a minute. Just look at the Mishkan Taseh. I'm sorry. Vasita. No, what am I? I'm in the wrong. I skipped. I'm sorry, I made wrong. My mistake. I need Lamed Vanachavav. After Lamed Hey, Vasabat Salel. Vayasuko Chachmele. Vayas Yuriel. Do you follow? Everything afterwards is Vayas. And therefore, Perek Lamed Hey, the opening line is Eila Dvarim, is referring to building the Mishkan. And he continues in Pasuk Daled. But parenthetically, before I begin, you can work 6 days a week. On the seventh day, you can't work. It's called a Shabbat Shabbaton Hashem. Anyone does work is put to death. And you can't make fire. You can't make a fire hotter, basically to melt down metal to make the kiddim on Shabbat. And then here's what you have to do. What's the idea? This is introducing the laws of the Mishkan to build the Mishkan. Before I build the Mishkan, oh, by the way, it doesn't override Shabbat. Shabbat overrides Avodah in the Mishkan, even though it's not your work, it's God's work, but still you can't do it. And then, so basically I'm making an opening statement. Oh, by the way, Shabbat overrides, and then here's what you have to do. It's not Chazal, understand it. But you understand the pattern? An introductory line. Now, what's interesting, the rabbis have to learn from Elad Dvarim, Lamitet Malachot. That's a Midrash Halacha to get to number 39, which is really learned from how many times it says there's 39 things we have to make. It's starting from, Eta Mishkan from here, to Pasachaf, there's 40 or 39 things you have to make. So it's really cool how the rabbis, the 39 really is based on this, and we use the Gematria. Eile is 36 in Gematria, and Devarim is 2, and Hadvarim is, that's how the rabbis learn 39 with the Midrash Halacha. But in Pshat, this is referring to the Mishkan, and this telling you the Mishkan overrides, Shabbat overrides building the Mishkan, and now we have the same thing in Sefer, where are we? In Sefer Vayikra. Get back here. Vayikra, here we are. Okay, we just had Sefer Vayikra Chav Gimel. Chav Gimel. What was the same thing? No, our opening line is, these are the Moedim, Shabbat overrides, and then these are the Moedim. which means basically Shabbat overrides Yom Tov. Now, why did I spend so much time on that? Because it explains something we say every Shabbat. Everyone here makes Kiddush Friday night? Kiddush Friday night is like making a toast for the queen. Remember the queen's coming for dinner? So first you welcome the queen, Shabbat Malkah, and you make a toast about how great the queen is. So first you thank God for inviting the queen. Remember? We thank Hashem who gave us Shabbat, right? And then we talk about how awesome Shabbos is. And we give 3 praises for Shabbat. What's so great about Shabbat? It's Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit. It's also Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim, right? Now, how do we know Shabbat is Zecher L'Maseh Bereshit? That's the 10 Commandments in Sefer Shemot. How do you know Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim? That's the 10 Commandments in Sefer Dvarim. Now, in the middle we say Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh. Now there's a longer nusach Ki Hu Yom Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh, but the right nusach is Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh. There's 3 dots. You understand it? Now, when we say Tchila L'Mikrei Kodesh, what are we referring to?
Vayikra 23.
Okay. And why do we say that on Shabbos but not on Yom Tov? If Yom Tov comes on Shabbos, we go Yom Tov Kiddush. We don't want to embarrass. On Shabbos, we say the Shabbos is more important than Yom Tov. It's the introduction, like it overrides Mikrei Kodesh. It's most important. So is that we're praising Shabbat, how great Shabbat is. But we bring 1 praise from Shemot, 1 praise from Vayikra, and 1 praise from Devarim. It's nice. It's simple pshat of Kiddush. That's all. There's also a Zemer on Shabbat. Rishon Hilu Mikrei Kodesh. Rishon Hilu Mikrei Kodesh. Yom Shabbat Yom Shabbat. What song is that? Rishon Hilu Mikrei Kodesh. Yonah Matzava Banoch, right? I think so. No. Rishon Hilu Mikrei Kodesh. No, Yom Zeh Mechubad. My mistake. Yom Zeh Mechubad B'Kol Yamin. Remember? Rishon Hilu Mikrei Kodesh. Yom Shabbat Kodesh. Okay, Koish Bino Yikadesh. She was saying Kiddush, right? Okay, and why we mention the two challahs, what do you call it? We'll get that in chapter 24. Anyway, I'm just saying it comes up in davening a lot, so I wanted to mention again. I spent too much time on it, but I want you to appreciate when you say Friday night Kiddush, if you have a little, not just kavanah but havana, where it came from. Shabbos is important, more important than Yom Tov, even though it comes out more often. Alrighty, now let's get to work on the what's inside. What are we? Now, okay. The first Moed, interesting, is going to be on the 14th of the month, Pesach Hashem. Notice it's a Moed, but it might not be a Mikra Kodesh, because on the 14th we bring the Pesach. Now, it doesn't say it's a Moed, but we have a date, because that night is going to be Chag HaMatzot, which overlaps. But in the first month, on the 14th, in the Bein Arbaim, we bring Pesach in the evening. The rest of the holidays are are full 24 hours. And then we have Chag HaMatzot, and there's nothing new about Chag HaMatzot that we didn't know before, correct? Just eat matzah for 7 days, and the first day is Mikra Kodesh, okay? And on the last day is Mikra Kodesh. Understand? There's nothing here we didn't know before we knew that all back in Sefer Shemot. But I'm presenting him now as a unit. Now, why is Chag HaMatzot 7 days? I want you to pay attention to the number 7 here. Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochelu. And we have a holiday in Big. What's the reason? Ask anybody. Why is Chag HaMatzot 7 days? Give me the classic. Give me the right. I want to hear the right, wrong answer.
That was the time until we got to Yom Suf.
Everyone says Kriyat Yam Suf was on Shvi Shal Pesach. I'm not saying it wasn't, but the commandment to keep matzah for Chag HaMatzot for 7 days, God gave us before we left Egypt. So maybe God knows the future. But it doesn't say in Chumash when Kriyat Yam Suf happened. Rashi tells us, but Chumash doesn't say that. We don't know.
It's a complete unit.
Yeah, the 7 is not just a complete unit, because Chag HaMatzot, what did we know about Chag HaMatzot? It's in the Aviv.
They couldn't sell a holiday in the
It's an agricultural holiday.
spells any longer.
And therefore we keep it when we come to the land of Israel. I'll show you in a minute in Sefer Shemot. Sefer Shemot presents it in the unit of agricultural holidays. The Shosh Regalim are agricultural. Aviv, Katsir, Asif. Right? The beginning of the grain, the end of the grain, beginning of the fruit, and then the end of our fruit harvest. Now, everything that has to do with agriculture, 7. And nature. That's my rule of thumb. That's the main point I want to get across today. Because 7, did I ever give you my share that in Vayikra pH equals 7? pH equals 7? I told you that once or not?
What is that?
There's the priestly section, the holiness section, the 2 halves, and what ties both sections together is the number 7. This which is
Are you implying that chemists made 7 the neutral pH for a reason?
No, it's a natural, it's nature at its best, isn't it? Of course,
It happened to work out that way, but yeah, it's interesting.
The chemist had Ruach HaKodesh.
Is there something about 7 being a complete unit in nature compared to 8, which is a complete unit outside of nature?
8 is Me'ala Teva, and look at the periodic table for that, right?
And so then you have like the 7 plus 1,
8
15.
8 takes nature and gives it order. There's about to go from 7 to 8. 8, if you know the periodic table, I think I have it right. It's remember you have 7. We have lasting 7 and 8. 7-day creation, 8 is special for Amis.
A full shell. A full shell of electrons is 8.
Yeah, and I think the periodic table has something about 8 on each row, doesn't it? If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that's
Something
fine.
like that. Okay, either way, that's not important for now. You just mentioned whether the chemists knew 7. I'm saying it's a joke that
You're
people.
Jewish, you don't celebrate Easter.
Let me explain why it's important for Vayikra and the theme. The whole point I'm trying to make is that when you visit the temple,
But maybe they'll take you out to dinner. So maybe they'll take you to Easter dinner.
how you behave when you leave the temple. In other words, my whole point is, it's not when you focus on the first half of Vayikra, it sounds like all that God wants.
All right, I got
Please mute everybody.
I'll mute. One second, give me a second. I'll mute.
I'm muting. I just can't get to everything.
I got it.
People.
I'm quick on the draw. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm
My throat's fingers are still good. I'm sorry. My point is that visiting the temple, right, is going to remind you of Har Sinai, but the goal of visiting the temple is to leave the temple and live a meaningful life. I'll just repeat the same idea. The goal of keeping Shabbat is not just Shabbat. Keeping Shabbat properly brings God into every day of the week. Okay? And visiting God at the temple brings God into your home. And Am Yisrael, keeping mitzvot, is going to bring God to the other nations if we do our job properly. In other words, whenever something's separated, it's called Kedusha, and give it a special, elevated with a special status for the sake of God, the separation is always for the sake of the group it's separated from. Therefore, the goal of Shabbat is to give meaning to the week. Now, that's the idea of Kedusha. But the number 7, ever since day 1, always relates to nature. And attributing nature to one God, and not many gods, but probably again the most important thing is not just knowing who the right God is, but knowing that God, who's still in charge of nature, uses nature as a tool for reward and punishment based on our deeds. Not based on our prayers, but rather based on our deeds. We pray to remember that God's overseeing nature is a function of our deeds, and therefore that makes prayer transformative and leads us to better behavior if it's understood properly. Now, but I want to put out for now that all the holidays in the Moedim are all going to revolve around the number 7, and they all revolve around nature. Because don't be surprised that we're a nation that have agricultural holidays, because our society in the time of the Bible was very agricultural, and we're living in Canaan. In Canaan, they have the other gods are nature gods. There's a rain god, remember, fertility god, sun gods. Every nation have gods that control the powers of nature, and God's telling us, that's what was the whole theme of Breshit, that all those powers stem from one God who's in control, but controls them based on our deeds, which I think is like one of the big revolutionary ideas of Chumash. I think I showed that to you in, let me just give you a good proof for it. If I go back to, I'm sure we did this way back in Shmot. If I go back for a second to Exodus 23, just read it last week. Remember, we have all the laws of Beinam L'Chavero in 3 chapters in Sefer in Parsha Mishpatim. Anyway, this is chapter 23 in Shmot. It started in Shmot. It started in chapter 20, the end after the 10 Commandments. We have 3 chapters of laws which begin with the law of how to serve God and not serve God with the Mizbeach, and then have primary laws being man and his fellow man, judicial laws, damages and responsibility, and then ethical laws. The ethical laws end with returning lost items and not lying and things like that, not taking bribes and not oppressing a stranger. And then we have Shemitah 6 and 7. Shemitah, for what purpose? For the sake of the poor, the people who are destitute, who need help. And then work 6 days a week. And rest on Shabbos, you workers have a day of rest. And then the beautiful summary line, everything I just told you in these last 3 chapters, keep. Don't you dare mention the names of other gods. Those are the Canaanite gods of nature. Don't dare mention them. Instead, come to me 3 times a year in the spring. Keep Chag HaMatzot 7 days when? B'moed Chodesh Aviv. And that's why I took you out of Egypt in the spring. And in the grain harvest holiday, was he said 2 months later. Right? And also come to me again in the end of your fruit harvest. At the end of the year, when you bring in your fruit harvest and you worry about the upcoming rain, and therefore 3 times a year you come visit me. But you see right here that the 3 agricultural holidays, called the Shosh Regalim, relate to, they're in contrast. Don't follow the other gods, follow your God. And the way your God judges you is going to be based on everything I just told you above, building that just society that Parsha Mishpatim highlights. Now, so keep that number 7 in mind, and that will take us to the rest of the Moedim.
But Chag HaAsif doesn't appear as a 7-day holiday in this parak.
It doesn't?
No.
You're half. I'll show you why you're half right. Watch what happens. So let's see what happens now in this unit. So we have Chag HaMatzot. Okay, did I bring the whole thing? I have to make it bigger now. So I'll show you where we have it. Here we have it right here. So what I want to show you is we have Chag HaMatzot, and then for some reason I'm just gonna highlight it, make it a little bit bigger. But I want to make sure we don't overdo it. I want to see the unit. From here to here is what we call Sefer Omer. We count 7 weeks, but the 7 weeks here don't have a lunar date, and therefore they're not a moed. They're Mikra Kodesh, they're not a moed. But when do we do them? When you come to land, uksartemek sirah, when you bring in the harvest, you bring the Omer, and then you count 7 weeks from the time you bring the Omer, and when the 7 weeks are over, now, it doesn't say to do it on Sunday, or it doesn't say to do it of Chol HaMoed. It says, Mibrochat HaShabbat. We'll do this later in detail. But what Chumash did, it took a set of laws that could be anywhere in Chumash. It talks about our grain harvest, during 7 weeks of the grain harvest. I'm counting the Omer during the grain harvest, which is a standalone share, and inserts it in the Moedim. You got my point, but I'm trying to get across here, is that I'm basically taking this whole unit here is inserted in the Moedim. There's no lunar date here in between. I have 7 days of Chag HaMatzot, starting on the 15th with the lunar date. Here I have the 7th month, the first day, and I insert these laws in the Moedim, which have lunar dates. What did the rabbis learn from there? Right? I need to start sometime. Because of that insertion, they say, let's link Sfirat Omer to Chag HaMatzot. I think in Pshuto Shemikra, it's better than the Tzdukim. The Tzdukim said, Mivrachat HaShabbat, this line over here, is referring to Sunday of Chol HaMoed. But it doesn't mention Pesach here at all. but Shabbat, because there's the Isur Melacha, there's Shvitat Melacha on Pesach on the first day of Chag HaMatzot. So it makes sense. Shabbat can be the day after Chol Hamoed just as much as it could be any Sunday. Now again, I'll do this later in detail. This will be a whole share to see what it's doing here. But the main I want to show you today is that the laws of Sfirat Omer is inserted in the Moedim, and that's why it has its own dibor. Because it's insertion, I have to start a new dibor for what we call the high holidays, which is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then I have another dibor for Sukkot, and I have to erase all that for a second and move further down. Now, what I have highlighted here, okay. What I have highlighted here is interesting. Okay. Then we have Sukkot, and as someone mentioned, it doesn't say it's called Chag Sukkot on the 15th day of the 7th month. I'll move to English in a minute. I just wanted to show you on the screen here. Lower down. Here it says like this now. I'll move it over. Okay, that's better. So again, we had Shvet Omer, then we have these laws are going to be what we call Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Then we have Sukkot. Right? And here it says on the 15th day of the 7th month, Chag Sukkot. It doesn't mention Chag HaSif at all. Work for, again, 7 days, Shivat Yamim, Hashem. On the first day, Mikra Kodesh. And then 7 days, bring a Korban. And then we have the 8th day. We'll talk about 7 and 8 in a minute. Now, then we summarize Eila Modeh Hashem. You see the summary? Modeh Hashem. Oh, I just messed that up really bad. Okay, clear them all. Okay. Eila Modeh Hashem is a summary of all these laws, which we call the Bikray Kodesh, which we call it Bikray Kodesh together, and we bring Korbanot on those days, as we'll find Pinchas, in addition to Shabbatot. Then after we finish the Moedim, oh, by the way, we forgot something. See this? Then Ach b'chamisha, I hope you see the line here. Ach b'chamisha sayum l'chodesh hashvi, bos bechem et fot haaretz, here we have Chag HaSif. Techog et Chag Hashem shivat yamim, b'yom rishon Shabbaton, b'yom hashmini Shabbaton. Now, why Chumash says this? It's really strange, isn't it? But we start with the Moedim. We summarize the Moedim at the end. Eila Modeh Hashem. I could have ended the whole unit right here. Eila Modeh Hashem ended here. And then I have an add-on about Chag HaSif. And Chag HaSif now is no longer called a Mikra Kodesh. It's called a Shabbaton. Now, basically, what's going to come out is that the historical aspect of the holiday will be the Moed, and the agricultural aspect of the holiday will be called the Shabbat. For example, the 7 weeks of our grain harvest that started in the Aviv and ended with Chag of weeks, Shavuot, which is Chag HaKatzir, we have the number 7, and the word Shabbat is everywhere, isn't it? Remember, Shabbat Shabbatot Timot Tiena? Everything is about Shabbat. It doesn't say Moed. It doesn't say it emphasizes Shabbat. When we get to the 7 days of Chag HaMatzot, what happens? I mean, of Sukkot, what do we say? It's what do you call it? The first day Bikra Kodesh, the last day Bikra Kodesh, and then we summarize. Them. Eila Modeh Hashem, and then we go back on those same 7 days for the 15th to the 21st, right? Which is time of Asif. Then we have the first day and last days are Shabbaton. Again, why Shabbat? When I'm getting at, whenever we mention agriculture, I'll talk about Shabbat and the number 7. That's all. Now, later we have to talk about why Chumash does this. I'll just give a hint to it in a second. Where are we? Remember, we've been seeing lots of chiasms in Sefer Vayikra. We saw chiasm, remember, in chapter 18 and chapter 20, and how they form a unit around chapter 19 and everything. And we saw the chiasm within chapter 20. But this one's even a lot easier to identify. Let me get rid of all the drawings again. But notice what happens. I have Shabbat, I have in the beginning Moedim, followed by Shabbat. And then I have introduction Moedim, Shabbat, Moedim, I finished the Moadim, Elam Modei Hashem, here, and then I finished, then I have Shabbat, and then Moed again. If you remember ABCCBA, basically I have Moedim introduction, Moedim at the very end. Then I have Shabbat, and Shabbat right before the Moedim again. I have Moed, Shabbat, Moed, and then Shabbat and Moed. So again, now why Chumash does that, we have to talk about. But what we have to talk about is why am I connecting between the historical aspect of a holiday? Because the historical side is keep us to remember that I put you in Sukkot when I took you out of Egypt. So why am I connecting the historical aspect of the holiday to the agricultural side? I have to dedicate a whole share to that. But the main thing I want to show you today is how the number 7 is so central. There'll be 7 and 7 and 8. Now, before I forget, let's go back to the top of the source sheet and show you how central it is to the whole book. Okay, the biblical history of 7. So, chapter 1, remember Bereshit, that's a no-brainer. That introduces the whole idea of all beginning with light. Then the story of the manna, which every week I hope to get there. We'll have to do this next week again. The story of manna in Shemot chapter 16 will be the key to understanding the whole concept of Shabbat. We'll have to get to it next week. They have the mitzvah of Shabbat in the 10 Commandments, which is going to be our reminder, our covenantal reminder in the realm of time. We saw the laws of Shabbat in Shemitah in chapter 23 in Neder Mishpatim already. Then we have Shabbat again. It's repeated after the sin of the golden calf. And then in the laws of the Mishkan also, it's the 70th board. That's when Shabbat gets a punishment. Then we have 7 days of Miluim in both in Shemot 29 and Vayikra 8. That make the Kohanim, followed again by the 8th day. And all the Kapar rituals in Vayikra, chapters 12 through 16, all with the number 7. Now, all Yom Kippur is 7, remember? 7 times up, 7 this. All the sprinkling is 7. And all the Tumah, 7-day Tumah. Something special on the 8th day. But remember, Yoledet, 7 and 8. Tzarat, 7 and 8. Or, when the 7 days over, then the 8th day do something special. Same thing with Zav and Zavah. It'll always be 7 and 8. And these I'll end with here, 7 and 8. Now, what's gonna be the again, we'll get to, I guess we'll have to do next week the first Shabbat again with the Omer. What I want to end with, where are we? Stop the share and just open up a Chumash. In chapter 14, I must open up a Hebrew one, English Hebrew one. If I go back to Vayikra, not this one. After chapter 23 is over, I get chapter 24, and all of a sudden I find laws that belong in Shemot. What do we have here? We went through the whole shir without any sirens. It should be, but without. Where are we? Chapter 24. Look at these laws that are copy pasting from Parshat Tetzaveh. Right? What's got to Moshe? Tzaveh b'nei Yisrael v'yichoi lech Hashem ezayit tzakid lamor lalot ner tamid b'chutz laporochet bo edut yaruchdo Aaron me'er vad boker amnot Torah yaroch nerot lifnei Hashem. For some reason, I repeat the law of the menorah, which again, remember with its 7 candles, etc. But the idea of the korban tamid on the menorah, and then the korban tamid on the shulchan, taking solet and bring 12 chalot, etc. 6 on each side. And when do we switch the lechem on the shulchan? Every Shabbat. Yom HaShabbat, Yom HaShabbat, Yerochem L'Lifnei Hashem Tamid, Me'et Hashem, V'Tal Lord. Now, this law is in Parshat Tetzaveh. Okay? Where do we have the law of lechem hapanim beforehand? This law we had in Tetzaveh, and belongs with the menorah. It belongs there. Where do we have the law of lechem hapanim beforehand? Anyone know? The law of switching lechem hapanim every Shabbat. Anyone know where we have it? There's a good reason. There's a good reason why nobody knows where we have it. You know why? Because this is the only place it is.
Well, it appears in Vayakel.
But that switching on Shabbat with all the details.
The Lechem Panim are referenced in
But
Vayikra.
it says Lechem Panim also in chapter 25. It says on the Shulchan you put Lechem Panim Lefanai Tamid, and Vayikra put Lechem. But the details of how to put it and who eats it, etc. What I want to claim is, it's not that I'm repeating Parshat Tetzaveh. Parshat Tetzaveh, the oil for that belongs here. Why? Because we just had the whole agricultural cycle, didn't we? We just had the grain harvest, remember? The beginning of the grain harvest, end of the grain harvest, end of our fruit harvest. And then the fruit harvest ends with the olive season. Notice on Sukkot, it doesn't say Yitzhar, it says V'aspacha mikorcha mikvecha. It doesn't say Yitzarecha, it doesn't say olives. After I finish Sukkot, I have olives, Shemen Zayit, and then I have Shulchan, which is the bread that I saved up for my harvest beforehand. I have to eat the rest of the year until the next Pesach. But the whole theme here is agriculture, and using your agriculture and coming to God. I'm presenting to God I weighed my first grain. Remember with the Omer. I'm trying to show you the overall theme here in Vayikra is the number 7 and agriculture, not just on the holidays, on a very daily basis, on a weekly basis. You see how if I switch the bread every Shabbat, every 7 days, I'm bringing again Shabbat to nature. Now, relating nature to God, as opposed to many gods, is so critical in core Judaism. In light of what we were fighting against, the idea that there's one God in charge of all the powers of nature, as opposed to turning to the gods of nature. That's what we're fighting with Canaan, and the main reason for it is so it's important. Not just the technical; it's not only theological; it's behavioral. Because if you believe there's a separate rain god for rain, and a separate one for fertility, etc., then if I want rain, I simply have to pray to the rain god, praise him, feed him, whatever to do. But it's got nothing to do with my behavior. Chumash is screaming, it's only one God, but that one God gives you all these things based on your behavior. I come to the temple on the holidays and have all these rituals to remember that theme. And that's why the psukim of the Shush Regalim back in Mishpatim are so important. But when I come to God on the agricultural holidays, I'm coming to remember, if I want to be worthy of a good grain harvest, I better be on my toes. If I would be worthy of a good fruit harvest, I better be on my toes. I have to thank him for what I received and worry about the next season. And now we'll need that later on to understand why a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur doing here, because they don't appear to be agricultural, but they're introducing next year's rainy season. And that we know from our prayers already. But when we get the korbanot in Pinchas, we'll see how Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur connect to Shemini Atzeret and the idea of the rainy season. But now tying all that to 7 is tying together all these themes of Chumash. But it's not voodoo and some ritual and magical number 7. Ever since day one, the theme of 7 is key to remembering that all the powers of nature stem from one God who judges us based on our behavior, not only my behavior, but our behavior. Because God doesn't give rain to me and not to somebody else. There's if nature rewards and punishes societies, not just individuals. That's how it works. That's how nature works. And therefore, it's not enough for you to be good. You have a responsibility to make sure your community is good. That leads to leadership and things like that. But I'm trying to show you behind all these technical laws in Vayikra, there's something very deep with the number 7. And don't be surprised that lighting the menorah is so important here. Remember, because that's the theme of light. Lot ner tamid, to give and don't be surprised that all these things, making candles and light, we talked about this before, and making bread and making wine, and eating and domesticating animals, they all relate to our tzedel belokim. That's everything we do in the temple reminds us not only that we're chosen, but God made us in creation. If I go back to what we did back in Breshit, if it's not just knowing that God created and recognizing that, it's recognizing He gave you the ability to be creative. That's your tzedel Elokim, because Elokim every day, remember, He plans, He acts, and reflects. So God wants us to be creative, but He wants us to take a break once a week and each season to reflect on our creativity, to make sure that we're doing it for good. And therefore, I need that time out to reflect. And all the holidays are going to center on the number 7 to remember that theme of creation, of God creating in the 7 days and resting on the 7th. But the purpose of resting is to give meaning to the 6 days that you're working. That's why we have 6 and 7. And I'm trying to explain why it's so central to the second of Vayikra. And the whole point is, if I'm coming to remember God in the temple, it's not just I'm not coming as a consumer, I'm coming as an employee. That's how I tied them together. Okay, so we'll stop here. I went farther than I thought today. I still didn't finish my source sheet. Notice every single week I've had the man at the end. I never get to it. So maybe next week I'll start with that. I need that to explain. I need the manna to explain Shavuot, the 7 weeks of Shavuot, and it will take us right to Passover. So it'll be ready for Yom Tovim. Anyway, we have to pray for good news, and
You need a cup of tea.
yeah.
David, how you doing in Beit Shemesh?
Thank God.
That was in your neighborhood.
My house shook, but we're fine.
Okay.
That wasn't far from you, David, right?
It was 8-minute drive.
Oh, 8-minute drive. So it's in Beit Shemesh itself. Like
Yeah,
Yeah,
old
that-
Beit Shemesh.
Old
They're not
Shemesh.
announcing it on the news, but it's the oldest shul, the first shul that was established by the Romanian community.
So it
The
hit the
founders of
shul.
Beit
The direct hit was on the shul.
Yeah, there's a shelter in the Beit Knesset, and it was a direct hit. The experts say that the payload was 480 kilo.
Oh my gosh.
Gosh.
Yeah. So I don't know. Even if the shelter was built according to Tekken, to the standard, I don't know if it would have withstood.
No,
that.
they say if you get a, God forbid, a direct hit, it can't. None of these shelters. The idea is all the debris that floats around that you're protected from, but a direct hit, 480 kilos, 1,000 pounds, more than 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, 1,050. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's pray to hear good news. But,
Amen.
okay. Yes.
Okay, take to me. Okay, I'm going off to take over. Okay.
Yeah. Go get tea for Fuhr Shlema. Please, God, we'll see you next week. And of course, B'Sha'ah Chad, Beni Gesundheit, Yamshich HaShiur Shelo Hervir Lifnei Shavua Banglit, Shavu Yedaber B'Ivrit Al Mizmor Kaf Beit. So for those who were at our Tehillim, our Purim Yom Iyun, so Benny spoke on Tehillim Kaf Beit. Purim gave an English thing. He's going to develop the theme, but that'll be back to his regular shir in Hebrew. I don't know why I had to translate it, because if you needed my translation, I would not recommend you come to the shir. Okay. Tomorrow, please God, speak Ramet live from Yerushalayim, where it will not be Purim. We'll be giving Beit Shemesh. I hear now it's Purim all over the place. I got that last week. But that'll be the only shir we have tomorrow. Everybody else at Purim, and then we'll resume. So please God, speak Ramet at 1 p.m. By the way, next week, and I already confirmed with Rabbi Leibtag, we changed the clocks in North America this week. So next week, we keep Eastern time. We're still a Toronto-based organization, so we'll try, unless it really doesn't work with the speakers. We'll see. But so the shir will be 11:15 Eastern, but it'll be 5:15 in Israel, not 6:15, and that will be for 3 weeks. I believe you don't change the clock till you always change the clock in Israel on a Thursday night, right?
The 27th.
Yeah. So for the next 3 weeks, we'll have including. And Rabbi Leibtag mentioned at the beginning, I haven't finalized every speaker yet, but please God, our Haggadah, I call it Haggadah Yom Iyun. We'll do the last couple of years, we'll go through the Haggadah in order on March 22nd, like 6 speakers, each taking, one aspect of the Haggadah. And then starting Monday till the following Tuesday, we'll have Shirim on Pesach every day. So I'll start in 3 weeks today, please God. Okay, let's hear good news. Like who did my or Simcha v'Sasa right? The more is Yud Gimel Adar. I don't know. Yom Kehila Lakol, as the Gemara says. The day Jews gathered together in prayer. That's what Tanit Esther is. Of course, in the Megillah, Tanit Esther was on Pesach. But our minhag, and it's really a very late minhag. It's post-Talmudic to fast on Tanit Esther. But the Jews should come together. That's our best weapon. Yeah, we need the IDF and we need Kadosh Baruch Hu, but the Jews' best weapon is coming together and joining. So let's please do that. And David, who else is in Israel now online? Judy, you're in Israel also, right? Yeah, you're also in Israel. Anybody else in Israel?
I'm
Yeah,
also in Israel.
I'm sorry?
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. So, okay, you guys are the heroes of the Jewish people. We
Yeah,
are
Rav
still
Menachem.
negligent. Menachem, of course, he already left. He's in Gush. But I'm saying, no, I estimate in general, we get about 20% of the people who come to classes are living in Israel. I don't, it's hard to know from class to class, but that's I know when people download stuff, it's about 20% always from Israel, which is nice. Okay.
What was
So
his joke? What was his joke about pH? I didn't understand what he was saying, pH. What is that? Priests, holy nation? What
No,
was
the acid,
what was the
acid and
humor?
base.
The what?
On the scale of acidity, that
Right.
chemistry. We're talking chemistry now. So how well do you remember your chemistry? Not well.
What did that have to do with priests and a holy nation, pH?
Ruth, I know you're talking, your lips are moving, but you're muted. Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. The pH is the balance between acid and base. So pH 7 is neither acid nor base. So that's the mean, the MEAN. It's when everything is in balance. It's a 7. It's like,
Steady
Yeah.
creation.
Okay, everybody. Hope to see you for good occasions in the near future. Okay, be well. Okay, thank you, everybody. Shavua Tov.